such a time as this.
And welcome to For Such a Time as This Roundtable. As always, I would please give me a thumbs up. For those who are out there, let me know that we are coming through loud and clear on all of our streaming platforms, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. And as soon as Gab can get with it, we'll be on Gab and BitChute, and we'll see how Trump does with his new thing. So we'll see if we can do live stuff with him. As always, want to encourage people, please go to our website, for such a time as this .today, for such a time as this .today, not .com, not .org, .today, for such a time as this .today. Always be caught up to our newest material. I think we have a really good one.
I'm glad to hear that.
Mass Formation Psychosis and COVID-19. It's so good that you will not be able to watch the replay on YouTube. So please go to Rumble. We're streaming live at Rumble. And we will put the Rumble link in the chat portion later on this afternoon. But Mass Formation Psychosis. And with that, I'll turn it over to the producer of the night, Miss Abigail Ruth. Take it away.
Yeah, so mass formation psychosis. Actually, the first time I heard about it was from when Joe Rogan interviewed Dr. Robert Malone on his show. And Malone was talking about it. And I think Dr. Peter McCullough was also talking about it on Joe Rogan's show. And I thought, well, what is this? So I did some research. In fact, I did most of my research today, but I found this to be absolutely fascinating. And this really does, Pastor James, you're fond of saying that modern psychiatry is very good at observing and describing things.
At observation. Yes.
Not so good with answers and solutions, but
zero. Terrible.
So, but even the descriptions of this are interesting. Basically, what mass and let me just say, it's not actually mass formation psychosis. It's just mass formation. I think the good doctors added that word on the end of it, and it doesn't really belong. But I didn't know that when I made the when I did the planning and put the
What do you mean? He put that on there?
Yes. It's just mass formation, and basically mass formation is the study of mob psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the easiest way to describe it. And it comes up with some answers as to why the whole world has been turned upside down over a virus which has an almost 100% survival rate and isn't dangerous for most people, and why we can't even, there are lots of people in most of our lives that we can't even have that conversation with.
They don't want to have it.
They don't want to. They're not capable, whatever. We look around and we say, what on earth happened? People are not able to think logically or clearly. Why are we vaccinating children? Why aren't we treating...
Because it's safe and effective, Abby. Don't you know that?
People with drugs that actually work and won't kill them. And so many people seem to have bought into such obvious lies. And now we're going on 2 years. How on earth can this be happening? So a Belgian professor, he's a professor of clinical psychology at Ghent University. He also has a master's degree in statistics. His name is Matthias Desmet, has been studying this. And he thinks it gives you some answers about this current craziness we're experiencing. So basically, as I said, mass formation is also known as mob psychology. It's the study of how individual behavior is influenced by large groups of people. This is not a new idea. This branch of psychology has actually been studied by Freud, by Alport, Le Bon, and many others. But Matthias Desmet is perhaps right now the leading voice on this, particularly with regard to how it's affecting the response to COVID-19. He became interested in this, just a little background, in May of 2020 when he ran the numbers in Sweden. He's also, of course, a statistician. And so the current model, by the time he ran the numbers, according to the models they were using, there should have been 80,000 dead people in Sweden because, as we all know, Sweden did not lock down, they did not mask, they had no stay-at-home orders, none of this. They just went about their lives, but only 6,000 people had actually died. So he decided that the danger was being vastly and dramatically overestimated. And the models were clearly off, so the narrative should have been corrected at that point. It was past obvious, but nothing changed. In fact, as we all know, basically our leaders went on as if this was the Black Plague again, and just kept doubling down on all their measures and making things worse. And to my mind, I don't think they made one wise decision regarding how to respond to this. I can't think of a single one. But anyway, so he noticed also, and like I noticed, and I'm sure you noticed, that our leaders, and it seemed like everyone else too, was focused on the danger of the virus to the exclusion of everything else. Nothing else mattered. That was, I remember thinking when I was watching, I don't know about you, Pastor James, but President Trump's his daily briefings, those things he had where he had, Fauci and Birx would be talking, and he would be talking about numbers of ventilators and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, where's the economic expert to provide some balance here on what's happening to all these people whose business has been shut down?
No, don't watch that. Don't watch that.
It wasn't.
No.
There were no metrics.
No.
It was like, what is wrong with these people? This is not the only thing that matters. But apparently it was at that point in
That's
time.
all. Yeah, that's all they cared about.
To the people in charge.
Yep.
And it wasn't like there weren't alternative voices. There were publicized warnings that locking down the whole world would ultimately kill millions of people, especially children in developing countries, much more than the virus ever would. There was no risk-benefit analysis. The cure was obviously 100% worse than the disease. It seemed like the authorities simply couldn't take any other information except about the disease. They were laser focused on COVID.
But again, Abby, that wasn't by mistake.
Well, see,
It's not by mistake.
I don't know if you can
believe
call it a
that's by
mistake.
They wanted. Their end goal was what we see right now, a totalitarian takeover.
I think that
from the
is some
beginning.
people's end goal, but there are too many middlemen here. And it doesn't make sense. Like when you try to talk to your, I don't know, your brother, or your sister, your aunt or uncle, who apparently cannot hear you when you ask them.
Peons. Yeah, I agree with you. The
But I
peons.
think the same. That has also happened to a lot of our leaders. I think. I'm not talking about. Okay. I mean, behind the scenes, there are absolutely globalists using this. They have a design.
Yeah.
They think this is wonderful.
Yeah.
They're using it to their advantage and will continue to do so. But I think even a lot of our local leaders. Anyway, let's talk about what he has to say.
The local leaders are what?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, even in leadership positions, like even on school boards, I think they're delusional.
Those are the peons. But at least on a memorial level, Lightfoot actually said, I mean, we played a video here, welcome to the New World Order. So the mayor of Chicago is at the beginning of this pandemic says, welcome to the New World Order. So she's not a
she wouldn't be necessarily one of these people.
Yeah, but depending on how low you want to go, whether it's the village or
and
local.
I think some of the people on pretty high up positions are delusional as well. But anyway, let's talk about it because I think it's interesting in its details.
Okay.
So anyway, Matthias Desmet concluded that the core of the problem wasn't biological, it was psychological, and it was a case of mass formation. And so, let's see. So he wrote an opinion piece on it in August of 2020. And he contends that mass formation is actually a symptom of the real problem. That according to this theory, there are several specific conditions needed for mass psychosis to happen. There's a lot of psychological misery out there before this happens. But if you want to play the first video, JP, I forget what his last name is, going to briefly tell us about what those conditions are.
Number 1, lack of social connection. According to the national survey, 25% of people reported they do not have a single close friend. And it also found 75 million adults between the ages of 18 and 27 were lonelier than any other demographic. Lack of social connection? Got that. Number 2, lack of meaning. Gallup polled people in 142 countries and found 63% of people were so disengaged at work that they reported sleepwalking through their workday, putting time, not passion, into their work. Lack of meaning? Check. Then a third condition that arises when the first two are present, free-floating anxiety. When you lack connection and meaning, anxiety is a natural response. The World Health Organization, who are super trustworthy by the way, say that 1 in 5 people have an anxiety disorder. Then that gives rise to the fourth condition necessary for mass formation psychosis, free-floating aggression and frustration. When the lack of social connection, lack of meaning, anxiety, frustration, and aggression all converge together, conditions are ripe for the media to then present a narrative that indicates an object of anxiety, and at the same time they can also present a solution for dealing with such an object of anxiety. People are then entranced in a noble lie by the media, while centralized authorities try to censor and destroy anything that runs counter to their narrative, including truth. This causes people to attach all their free-floating anxiety and frustration onto the object of anxiety indicated by the narrative. They then have a huge willingness to participate in the strategy indicated by the narrative to deal with the object of anxiety. Have you ever seen a very intelligent person unable to have a rational discussion about the object of anxiety or the strategy to deal with it? That's because they're unable to access their own thinking in those moments. They're controlled, hypnotized actually, by the high pressure of a mass formation psychosis.
If you can't talk about your mental capacity, then I think that has a direct correlation to how intelligent you are.
About your mental capacity.
He says, you ever seen an intelligent person be unable to talk about their anxiety?
Is that what he said?
An intelligent person can't talk about his or her own anxiety. They can't talk about it because they're blinded by it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this is okay. So that's
okay.
one of the conditions. As part of this theory, is free-floating anxiety. In other words, so free-floating just means people are anxious, but they don't know why.
Yeah.
It's not connected to a specific circumstance.
Always connected to a circumstance, but they may not be able to identify it.
Yes. They cannot identify it. And I honestly don't think that's a function of intelligence, though. Maybe we might disagree there.
Yeah, we're going to disagree on that.
Desmet is actually, I said he was from Belgium. In Belgium, so he knows the statistics there. He says 1 out of 5. What is a Belgian person called?
Belgium.
Wait a minute. A Spanish, somebody from Spain's called a Spaniard. There's an Englishman. There's a Frenchman.
Belgian.
I don't know. Anyway.
Belgium.
1 out of 5 people who live in Belgium have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And 11 million, get this, 11 million each year. Let's see, there are 11 million people in Belgium, yet 300 million doses of antidepressants. And that's only antidepressants. That's not anti-anxiety medicine.
That means you got multiple people taking multi-antidepressants.
I mean, even if everybody took a little bit, it would be 27 doses per person.
Per year, you're saying?
Yes, per year. And I know that it's very high here too in the United States. I have no idea what the statistics
Well,
are, but
I've heard
it's
it.
terribly
I've
high.
heard it some years ago that says 1 in 2, 50% of every home you see
Oh my goodness.
has some form of psychological medication being imbibed there, and they're including medication for insomnia. So if you can't sleep, you can't sleep by yourself. So
Well,
because of anxiety, so that would be considered a psychological aid, some sort of psychological
interesting.
aid.
I didn't know that. I understand the connection, but I didn't realize that. Yeah. Well, anyway, so people look for something to connect their anxiety to. They need a reason in order to make sense of it, and COVID provided that reason. And so having a reason also, according to Desmond and according to the theory, helps them feel like they are more in control. And so,
go ahead.
If that made sense. So that is only one of the tenet. He also talked about a lack of social bond. I don't think it's any secret now that everybody is online all the time. You hear all the time how people are that much more lonely because they aren't really connecting. They're not connecting in person.
No. One of the hallmark signs of someone who flips out and goes on a shooting spree is that they're withdrawn from society, right?
Yes.
Whether they were picked on or, made fun of, and they withdrew and didn't have any friends, so they just started shooting up the place. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot of people. These people, they look at each other's Facebook pages, they get depressed or whatever it is right now with the young people especially. Look at that person's life is wonderful, mine is terrible. Nobody's talking in person. Yes, it's a big problem. Loneliness is a big problem, really? From what I understand. I mean, we have our group here, Pastor James, so and families and stuff, but for a lot of people it is. So there are fewer and fewer in-person social bonds. So with the COVID thing, we're all in this together. It provided a sort of social bond where people felt more connected.
Well, help me out. How do I feel more connected through COVID? I mean, we're all suffering together.
Because we're all in this together.
We're all
yes,
suffering
and
together.
we have a mission, and I mean, there's more to it than that. We are doing something wonderful. We're saving
the planet.
Lives, and well, that's connected to people experiencing life as meaningless or senseless. And now they have a purpose. I mean, this isn't very hard to see.
To save the life that was meaningless in the first place.
No. They're saving other people's lives by following all the rules.
Oh.
Right? So that did strike me right away, just on my own little head. I thought, the people seem to have grabbed onto this, and it's given their life meaning.
Oh, that's terrible.
Very much so. And so if you want to play the next clip.
Oh, that's sad.
He's going to talk about the lack of the social bond and how COVID has provided a bond, at least that people feel there is a bond.
Oh, goodness. Here we go.
And then a next step is taken. Something happens at another level. Meaning, because many people participate in the same strategy to deal with the object of anxiety, a new kind of social bond emerges, a new kind of solidarity. So people feel connected again in a new way. And that's the most crucial thing. If you look at the corona crisis and you listen at the you listen to the mainstream narrative, then you will hear that everything is about solidarity. You have to participate. You have to accept the vaccine. You have to respect social distancing, because if you don't, you lack citizenship. Mm-hmm. You show no solidarity. So that's the most crucial thing always in mass formation. So that's the real reason why people buy into the story, even if it is utterly absurd, is not because they believe in the narrative. It is because the narrative leads to the new social bond. That's the real reason. And then...
That's terrible. So basically what you're saying is, or what he's saying is, they're manipulating a bunch of sick people.
Well, sick people.
Mentally sick
mentally,
people are being controlled.
I don't know. Sick is maybe not the way I would describe it, but
Weak.
Mentally weak, mentally
Inhibited.
mentally under siege somehow.
Mentally under siege. You trying to so you don't want to say crazy people. You just want to make them
because they're
sound.
not. They're not all, Pastor James. They're not crazy in the classic sense. They are not insane. They are insane in this about this. But you and I both know people who have bought into this.
See, here's where you and I are different. I have a broader sense of insanity than you do.
You must, yes.
If you are out of touch with reality, to me, that is the definition of insanity. But okay.
But it's very specific. See, this meets an emotional need.
That's how insanity starts, Abby. Emotionally distraught people.
Okay.
Messes with their thinking. So
I could buy that. So, like he just said, and that was Matthias Desmond. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that before we played it. But he says that this is always the most crucial thing, is the social connection, which brings up the free-floating aggression toward those who refuse to be part of the group, which should be people like you and me.
There's a lot of people who's refusing to be. But what you're trying to say is that if you're not sick, you're not going to go along with this. All right, let me stop saying that.
Yeah,
if you
wouldn't
don't
say
have
sick.
I would. I'm just trying to be nice. But if your life has meaning, Vicki said vulnerable. The word we want is vulnerable. Yeah, they're vulnerable, but it's I agree with you, Vicki, but most sick people are vulnerable. I mean, the kid who wants friends is vulnerable, and he can be manipulated into doing what the leader of the group wants him to do or wants her to do. And he's mentally malleable. Shall I say that?
Yeah. Well, and what also occurred to me, okay, so we're talking about a lack of a social bond, people finding life to be meaningless, having anxiety,
That sounds
having
like
aggression. You know what? That is a description of the fruit of a secular society, completely.
that is the fruit of a sick group.
No, but it's more than that. I mean, I think that is the fruit of secularism. What gives our life meaning? Our life has
you
meaning.
can be secular and have meaning.
Yeah, but it can only go so deep.
But you can still have meaning. Like an atheist who plays football, he has meaning. He's going to try to play football.
But again,
to the
he
best
can't
of his
play
ability.
football forever. On the day he dies, or when he gets old, how much?
I get it, but a secular person who's a superstar in football, basketball, baseball, his life is not meaningless. Do you see what I'm saying? And he won't be driven to.
But what is what is
Emotionally.
baseball? What is football? I mean, ultimately,
I get it, but at least his life has meaning in his eye. Or a politician.
it's a very shallow meaning.
I agree with you, but is not this person you describing, or this guy is describing, free-floating anxiety, no meaning in life, emotionally distraught, mentally malleable. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, according to Desmet, we are describing about 30% of the population.
Oh! Do you think 30% of the people...
Brainwashed because
Or
of mass
like
formation.
this?
Yes, they're about 30%. I
in
think it's
Sweden?
at least 30%.
Or Belgium? Where is he from? Belgium?
He's from Belgium. I think in the United States, at least 30% have bought into this whole thing, even though it makes no sense whatsoever.
Oh, well, you talking about bought into this COVID thing.
Right. And these,
I don't think you have to be...
these conditions, he says, are necessary for them to buy into that.
Not always.
The mass formation.
Unless there's a deluding spirit. But okay,
right.
I got it.
Unless God has sent a deluding spirit, and
Yes.
certainly.
That's what I think. Because I don't think first of all, I think the people that bought into this is more than 30%. It's pretty much the Democrat Party, right? Which is more than 30% of this country.
Okay, well, let me
Okay.
say also, there's 30% that don't buy in at all.
That's
We'd
the
be in
same
that
people.
camp.
That's the same people.
And then there are 40% who are in the mushy middle. Basically, they're willing to float along with whatever just is easiest.
I think that's the majority.
40%. 40, 30, and 30 is what he says. So that's his estimate.
Yeah.
So in the 40 might as well be part of the 30 because...
Which 30, though?
No, not our 30. The 30% of brainwashed, because it's a lot easier to go along with the flow.
Why would you say that if both groups are 30%? Why would they go with the lower 35? I mean, the lower 30%. If 30% are like us and 30% are the crazy people and 40% in the middle, why do they automatically go towards the crazy people and not the same people?
Because it's easier, because that is what all the authority figures are telling them.
So the 30% of the crazy people are in authority. That's what you're saying.
Well, whether they're crazy or not, I don't know. Some of them are, yeah. But some of them also know the truth. But, okay. Let's continue on.
All right.
So he says that the payoff of being part of mass formation is psychological. It's a state of mental intoxication. People have switched from a highly negative state, which they were in because they lacked social interaction, they felt like their life was meaningless, they had anxiety, etc. And now they feel a lot better because they're part of something, and it's met all those needs in a different sort of way. And he also says that the purpose is, of course, the meaning is now we're in this heroic struggle against the coronavirus. It gives your life meaning. And anyway, of course, too, as we said before, that the people who refuse to take the shot and wear the mask and all that stuff, those people become a target of aggression, which we see a lot, things that are said against us.
Yeah. Vicki says vulnerable people who had no meaning in their lives. Everyone needs meaning. I agree with that. But do you think? I would think in the United States of America, no matter how shallow it is, and me, if it's not eternal things of God, it's shallow. But no matter how shallow it is, I would say most people in America have some meaning in life, whether it's a student or you're working or whatever, right? I would say most people in the United States have meaning. I mean, how do you get up
I think you can be
without meaning, right?
I don't think having a job or being a student necessarily gives your life meaning. I guess it gives you a day-to-day purpose, a day-to-day something to do, but not necessarily the meaning that undergirds it all. I'm thinking meaning is deeper than that.
Okay. Kim says the brainwashed are louder. That's why they go toward, I guess, the 30%. Vicki says because it's harder to have a spine, so the 40% go with the go with the 30% because maybe they're in power and they're lighter. They're louder. And it's easier not to speak up and go along to get along. But my thing is, that means the 30% who's crazy, the 30% is just louder and more forceful, but the 30% that's more sane, we keep our mouths closed.
Well, how many times have you heard someone lately, well, even during this whole time, saying, yeah, so-and-so said, they took their child to get the shot, and I just didn't say anything. It was done.
It's their child. You can't say anything about it.
Well, it was too late then, or something to that, one of these talking points that's obviously absurd.
No, I agree.
And because if I'd have said something, they just would have blown up. How many times have you heard someone express something like that?
I got you, because the leaders, I think that's true. The leaders are actually the 30% that's in the the lower 30, I'm going to call them. Mm-hmm. I don't feel good keep calling them crazy, but the lower 30, they're in power. They own the MSNBC, the CNN. They're in the White House. They run the Senate and the House. They run Hollywood and propaganda. They run the newspapers, right? Mm-hmm. They run social media. That's the 30%, and they create waves. Now, did you remember the whole thing about Joe Rogan and how what's his name, Neil Young took his music off?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
You realize I just read an article. He quietly put his music back on.
Oh no, I didn't hear that. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, he quietly he didn't make a fanfare about it.
Oh my goodness, because nobody followed him except Joni Mitchell, right?
No, not really. And he started losing money, I guess. And so,
well, we
that's
can't
what I'm
have
saying.
that.
They create this perception. I think they create this perception, but I don't know. I don't think it's 30-30 when it comes to this. I think the lower 30 is more like the lower 10.
I don't know, James.
I don't know.
I know. I mean, I have family members, and I don't.
Yeah. I don't know
how hard it is to talk to them about any of this.
I think people are getting tired of this, though, Abby.
Well, maybe they are at this point.
Look at Canada. I think they created this perception.
But they
that they're
bought
way more than they
hook,
are.
But so many people have bought this up to very recently. How many people are boosted?
No, they
my goodness.
No, they bought it, but I think they ain't buying it anymore. At least I hope. I don't know.
I hope not too. But anyway, to continue on, actually, because I think the most interesting stuff is coming up here. So just really quickly, Desmet says that the masking, the social distancing, the shots kind of function for these people as a ritual. He says, the more absurd the measures, the more inclined they are to buy in. A sacrifice is demanded from an individual, and it makes no difference if the measures are absurd. They're willing to do it. I mean, even to the point of like taking their kids to get vaxxed, and these school boards who are perfectly willing to mask all these kids. Still to this day, when it's not even a thing for kids, and there's no reason to do that whatsoever.
But it's not for the kids, but it's for grandma.
That doesn't even make any sense either, does it?
None of it makes sense to me, but that's their rationale is you saving grandma.
Okay, well, when are we gonna quit saving grandma and let her die?
Oh, now see, you just insensitive now.
No, what I'm saying is there is always going to be disease. I'm just pointing something out.
Okay.
Should we take bicycles away from kids? More kids die in bicycle accidents than have died from
No,
COVID.
but you're going to kill grandma if you take the virus back to grandma.
Oh, my goodness.
And so Kim says this, if we don't keep our mouth closed, media closes it for us, or brainwash, or the brainwash want to fight and call names. Most of us just want to be left alone so we don't engage, and that is going to lead us to the gulags, Kim.
Yes,
if we continue
and that's what I'm getting to.
You're absolutely right, but I mean, you can't keep silent any longer. You keep silent, you're going to be silent in the gulags. That's where you're going to be, or you're going to take the shot and roll over and do what they say.
Or you just starve in your own home because you're not going to be able to ultimately buy or sell anything. But anyway, that's another thing.
Yep.
So how do we fight it? And this is what I think was really very fascinating. He says that it's extremely hard to wake someone up from mass formation. But we have to keep doing it. We have to keep speaking. We have to keep talking. Because historically speaking, once all the dissenting voices are silenced, that's when things get really dangerous and violent.
Oh, yeah. That's when Stalin starts to go crazy.
That's right, and kill 50% of his own party members. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. So
truckers unite.
What?
Truckers unite.
Yes. we need to make sure that there are dissonant voices in the public space. Hannah Arendt, who wrote The Origins of Totalitarianism, says that the moment the opposition is radically silenced is the moment that the totalitarian state becomes a monster that devours its own children.
Yep.
And they will do that convinced it's for the greater good. So let's look at the third clip here.
Because if you look historically, for instance, you can see that it was exactly at the moment that the opposition was silenced in public space, that there was no dissonant voice anymore in public space, that the totalitarian states started to commit their absurd atrocities. That happened in 1930 in the Soviet Union and around 1935 in Nazi Germany. At that moment, the opposition was completely silenced, was completely erased in public space. And at that moment, the system really turned absurd. For instance, Stalin in the Soviet Union, he started to kill no matter who. In the end, he killed 50% of his own party members who usually hadn't done anything wrong. So, and that's something typical. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Hannah Arendt, a German Jewish philosopher who wrote this wonderful book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. She says that at the moment the opposition is radically silenced in public space. At that moment, the totalitarian state becomes a monster that devours its own children. That's exactly what she says. The totalitarian system becomes a monster that devours its own children at that exact moment. So that shows us again that something radically different from a classical dictatorship. When a classical dictator manages to silence the opposition, he usually will become more friendly. Because this guy, a classical dictator, has a certain tactical awareness. He knows that at the moment he is in charge, and at the moment he really overcame all opposition. He knows that at that moment it's important for him to show the population that he will be a good leader. That's what he realizes. But in a totalitarian state, which is based on this process of sleep and hypnosis, totalitarian leaders are not aware or do not have the brains at that moment to just know that it will be to their own disadvantage if they continue to commit atrocities. But that's exactly what they do. It even gets much worse once they really have or the only voice in public space. So it's so important to understand that difference between classical dictatorships and totalitarian processes. For instance.
Okay, so what he's saying is that I'm not going to repeat it all, but he's saying that what's happening right now with this mass formation ends up in a totalitarian state. And then he makes a distinction between that and a dictatorship. And a totalitarian state is much worse. Look at Kim Starlene says, I won't go to the camps. Me and someone from their group will have a meeting with Jesus. I'm not quiet, but I've been suspended several times and even told by a stranger they hoped I died.
Why? What did you do, Kim? Your chat is one of the few that my comments show up in. I'm normally shadow banned here and on Facebook. What can you please tell us what happened here? But I've been suspended several times. I've been told by a stranger they hoped I die. What did you do to get that venom from that person, Kim? Oh man. But
yeah, chime back in, Kim. We'd be interested to hear.
So when you talk about dictatorships,
yes,
and totalitarianism, we talked about this before the show. Caesar was a dictator. Sulla was a dictator. These were dictators that took power, and Sulla, after he did what he thought was best for the state, gave up power, went home, and went to his farm and died. Caesar, after he took power, unlike Stalin, gave clemency to his enemies, which ultimately he died for, because the same people he gave clemency to stabbed him. And so he was trying to do what was best for the state. Sulla in his way, Caesar in his way. But these guys like Kim Jong-un, these guys like Stalin.
Totalitarian state, absolutely.
Yeah, he just doesn't care. And now you start to see the same stuff creeping into, at least in Canada, what Trudeau is doing. I mean, this is shocking to see. He is kneeling with BLM as they burn and loot. Kneeling with them, but won't even talk to the truckers who feeds his people. There's something terribly wrong with this picture.
So let me ask you this, Pastor James. Do you think that Justin Trudeau thinks of himself as wicked? I would bet he doesn't. I think we all have to rationalize ourselves and our behavior.
He's evil.
He is. But do you think he knows that?
I think he does. I think deep down he does. And here's the reason for it. He won't give to my knowledge, he will not meet with the truckers and give a reason and try to reason with them. He's just resorting to force. And by doing such, that's an acknowledgement. So if I say, Abby, why did you do this? Well, I don't want to talk about it. Abby, you knew that was my money.
Good, see.
Then explain it. Explain the greater good. When you can't explain the greater good, I think that is an admission of guilt.
But I could see somebody rationalizing, saying, well, if I explain why this is ultimately going to be better for us, that, we need the Earth's population needs to be cut from 5 billion people to 2 billion people. They're not going to understand this because they aren't as enlightened as I am, so I'm not going to even.
Well, now you're crazy.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't think he probably sees himself as
no, he doesn't.
A bad person.
I'm sure he's lied enough to himself to say he's not a bad person, but to say that he's totally clueless to the evil he's doing, I think is wrong because he can't explain it.
But it's worth it, see, because
obviously,
the ends justify the means.
He obviously thinks that, but I think again, he's self-deluded. I think he's self-deluded, and
Yes.
any self-deluded person at some point crossed the line.
Agreed.
And gave in to their self-delusions.
Right. And if you are your own measure,
Yeah.
if you don't have if you don't go with God's, what God tells you about right and wrong, now you've got nothing except self-justification. So Kim says, I just tell the truth. This was answering what she did so that the stranger told her that they hoped she died. The guy who wanted me to die was responding to a comment I made about vaccine side effects. He was one of the other 30%. Yes, and I know that Justin and the gal from New Zealand were both part of the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders program. Super.
Wait a minute. So the World Economic Forum put these people in power?
Well, maybe they trained him once they got there.
And these people in the World Economic
I don't know.
Forum and these groups like this, they're into a whole bunch of spooky evil stuff. I'm convinced. I'm convinced they are.
Could be behind the scenes, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing. The thing is, who put Jeffrey Epstein in power and who was he servicing? But anyway, I'm thinking stuff like that. So don't. Those people are. Yeah.
Well, they're they're in a class of their own, maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I thought that the course of action that Desmet recommends is this. And by the way, there's a link to both of these videos, the Desmet interview below too, and it is. I just thought it was one of the most interesting interviews I have ever watched. It's well worth your time to listen. Okay, so he says, continue to speak out. I think we talked about that. We should not expect a very large effect from speaking out. We may be able to wake up a person here and there. but continue to speak out anyway. And so Charles Mackay, who wrote Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, said this: "Men, it has been well said, think in herds. It will be seen that they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly, one by one." And you know what that made me think of was salvation. You know, the vast majority of people are following the herd, the wide road.
Broad is the road that leads.
And it's just one by one.
But narrow.
They get picked out of the fire. Which I think that's another form of mass delusion, unbelief.
Yeah.
He also says, number 2, the best strategy is always nonviolent resistance. Now, hang on. And I don't think he's talking about when the roving herds of gang members come through your town, Pastor James. I don't think that's what he's talking about. He said that violence, and this is true, will be used as an excuse to crack down with greater violence.
But if your violence is greater than his violence...
Well, I think our violence is not going to be greater than the government's violence.
Well, you didn't say that. But
Well, I think that's what he has in mind, I think.
Okay.
3, he says that the system will always destroy itself. The people in charge think they will be able to control things, but they won't, ultimately.
I don't know if I believe that. Say that again.
Says the system will always destroy itself.
I don't know if I believe that.
Well, I mean, I can't believe it's still going on in North Korea, but certainly the Soviet Union.
Long time. Cuba, long time.
Well, what's a long time history-wise? I mean, the Soviet Union basically went belly up, right?
Really?
Now,
it's on a comeback, though. It's on a comeback.
Yeah, but I don't think it's what it was.
Not
I
yet.
mean,
It's
certainly
coming
not
back.
like it was when it was
It's
under
coming back.
Stalin. I don't. Do you think what's his name? Putin is comparable to Stalin? I don't know if it's a
No, he can't.
totalitarian
He
state
can't.
anymore.
No, you can't.
Right. So a totalitarian state is what he's talking about. Will ultimately destroy itself. It may or may. I mean, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. And 4, finally, establish parallel structures that will allow people to survive independent from the system. This is something Rod Dreher talks a lot about, actually.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Live not by lies. And there are people, like, for instance, the America's Frontline Doctors, they're establishing clinics, COVID clinics, where you can actually get treated. At least that's the idea.
See how long that lasts.
Establishing, I mean, we have done that to a certain degree.
I
We've
agree.
established school, Christian schools,
I agree.
homeschool.
I agree. You ought to try. You should have tried. Yep.
So, yeah. So this is. Did you hear about the nudging? I mean, this whole it's a psychological operation. It was in the UK. It was exposed that they were trying to present things in a way that would be, psychologically manipulative. Let's just say that. And they had psychiatrists and or psychologists working on this to craft the message because they wanted to manipulate people into thinking COVID was more dangerous than it was because they were going to save more lives that way, presumably. But, yeah, I thought that was interesting, too.
Got one more video.
I do. I forgot about that. I'm glad you brought that up. It'll be just in time. Yeah, we could play that.
All right, here's the last video tonight.
For instance, also, totalitarian leaders typically are also hypnotized by their own voice and their own theory. They are hypnotized, Gustave Le Bon says that, Hannah Arendt says it as well. They are hypnotized by their own ideology, meaning that they do not believe what they tell the people, but they are so convinced that what they are trying to do in society, that the ideology that they are trying to impose to society will bring society to a kind of paradise. They are so convinced that what they are doing is the good thing, that they feel that it is justified to lie, to cheat, to manipulate, and so on. That's typically, but they are absolutely ideologically hypnotized. They are hypnotized by their ideology. That's something that is radically different also from classical dictatorships.
I don't know if I believe that. I don't believe that. I just think I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to justify why they're doing it. We as Christians, we have no problem saying they do it because they're just evil.
Right,
And,
but
and
most
human nature is evil.
yes, but it is human nature to justify yourself again and again and again
Yeah.
in any way you can possibly, even to yourself, telling yourself lies about your own behavior.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, what he's trying to say is that he's trying to say because they believe that at the end of the day it's going to be good. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know about that part.
I don't. That's
I don't
my
know if
point.
they care.
That's my. There you go.
If it's going to be good
That's
for
my
everybody
point.
else,
That's my
just if
point.
it's good for them.
Yes, that's my point. I'm not sure that last step comes into the mind. They don't care.
I will say this though, too. With the rise of the gay rights movement, at first there was just a lot of it was PR that people were. It was a PR movement, to cast gays as victims, and that people are born this way, and that it's perfectly normal, and they're just being birds. But then over time, you could see that they began to believe their own PR and become convinced of their own PR and convince everybody else too.
You think so?
Yes.
I don't know what's in their minds, but
That they were, that they're really victims, that they're really born that way, that it's really natural to engage in homosexual sex. I don't know. I think, they bought it themselves ultimately, for the most part. Not everyone. There are always exceptions, but that was just an observation from the last 20 years of watching that movement. Anyway.
well, mass formation psychosis. I think it is going on because I believe it is the deluding spirit spoken of in Thessalonians, and I think the psychosis is coming from the evil spirit.
Now, would you say that it was a deluding spirit in Nazi Germany?
No.
And in Russia?
No.
And in China during the Cultural Revolution?
Wait. Okay, I'm still stuck on Germany.
Okay.
I would say no in Germany, and I would say the reason is because the treaties at Versailles really, I'm pretty sure that's it.
Versailles?
Versailles, the treaty at Versailles, crushed the Germans and made them so desperate and hungry that they would follow anybody out of what they put Germany in. So Hitler comes to power and promises not to let his people go hungry and says, hey, if some Jews got to suffer, then the Jews got to suffer.
There were people there, though, that knew the truth and knew Hitler was a monster.
Oh, yeah.
Just regular people.
We're talking about mass, though. Yeah, yes.
But the masses followed him
Yeah.
as if he was some sort of savior.
Because the masses were hungry.
But he would say that what happened in Germany was an example of mass formation.
But
Also in Russia. Also in China.
but see, but the key term in that is psychosis. I'm not sure that I remember reading something a while ago that most Germans didn't believe that the Jews were as nasty and as ugly as you say they were. They just were following them because of national pride, and then they want to be hungry. That's what I read, and so, but
they were willing to commit atrocities. A lot of
how many?
them.
But you never heard where most Germans didn't know what was going on in these camps. Even a lot of the soldiers didn't know what was going on in these camps. Because remember, they told the Jews one thing, but when they got there, they put them in ovens and stuff. So it's not like we had internet back then. And he was broadcasting all over Germany what they were doing. They're like, yeah, let's kill the Jews. Let's kill the Jews. I don't think.
No, but rounding them up and snitching on your neighbor and.
If that's what it takes for us not to be hungry.
Oh.
I don't think that's not. It's wrong and it's evil, but it's not psychosis. You see what I'm saying? It's not a loss of.
Remember, psychosis is actually not part of it. It's mass formation. It's mob psychology.
Well, see, I was talking about the psychosis part. Now you're talking about the mass psychology. Fine, the psychology is I don't want to be hungry.
was more than that, but
Yeah, when there's pride, I'm
he
simplifying.
gives those as examples
simplifying
of mass
it.
formation. I'm saying.
Yeah. Then you say the psychosis part is what I was looking at, but that's fine.
That was the add-on by Malone
Yeah.
and McCullough.
I like that. In this case, I think it fits. I think it fits the psychosis part. So. But anyway. Any last words? Any last thoughts?
No, I think that's it. But except to just say, yeah, if this interests you at all, listen to that interview. It was really excellent and a lot of food for thought.
Yeah. And as always, well, not as always, but in this case, the replay will not be on YouTube. Look at the Rumble link I have up here in the chat. You can always find us at the Rumble channel, because if we keep this up on YouTube, they're going to strike us down again. And so the replay, as soon as this is done, I'm going to remove this from the YouTube, from their platform, because we cannot keep it up here. Go to our Rumble if you would like the replay. But let me end with this. It's the masses that go along, and Satan has been playing this game for many, many years. The crowd, and you look at the crowd. Many times the crowd is wrong. Jesus talked about this as we referred to it earlier. That broad and wide is the road that leads to destruction, but narrow is the way that leads to life and salvation, and few find it.
Right.
That's numbers that Jesus, that God is talking about. And so, how do we get to the point to where we don't follow the masses? I think each Christian has to come to a point where he or she makes up in his or her mind, I'm going to follow truth wherever it leads. If it leads to my death, then I'll follow my God, and I follow His truth. We're actually this Sunday in New Hope. We're going to be going through Hebrews chapter 11, the faith chapter, and oh boy, I've fallen in love with this chapter all over again.
By faith?
Yeah, by faith. Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was true. Never mind. I was thinking about the music. I thought that was 12.
No.
I got to change my music then.
Oh no, we're in Hebrews 11. Oh, I'm glad we had this conversation. So, all right, thank you. God bless.
Good night,
thank
everybody.
Thank you for listening to us. As always, follow the Lord. He'll never lead you astray. Good night.